One of my favorite sayings is seek the simplicity on the other side of complexity. And that's the challenge, is it's a very complex world. You're trying to accomplish so much. You're thinking about so many things. It is hard to get to simple. But I think every business can get to those three words that mean the most to them. The harder part is living into it.
Hey there, dental economist. If you're a dentist owner or a leader within a dental business thinking about growing production, case acceptance, patient and staff satisfaction, positive outcomes, and everything else that comes with running a dental business, then you're a dental economist, and you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Dental Economist Show. We're meeting at the intersection of profit and purpose as I sit down with dental leaders who share their stories about dentistry, business, and growth. Welcome back to the Dental Economist Show with me, Mike Huffaker. Today, I am honored to welcome Steve Bilt, who really needs no introduction. Steve is the founder and CEO of Smile Brands and has profoundly shaped the dental industry. Under Steve's leadership, Smile Brands has grown to support almost 700 offices across the United States, earning a reputation for excellence in service and employee satisfaction. His strategic approach emphasizes not only business acumen, but also a strong commitment to providing smiles for everyone, a philosophy that extends into his philanthropic efforts with the Smiles for Everyone Foundation. Steve, it's really, really great to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
Great, Mike. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, when I launched this podcast over a year ago, I was talking to Mehmet when we were chatting about it, and I was like, if I could get Steve Bilt on, I'll feel like the podcast has made it. So you've been one of the dream guests since day one. So I do really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you for having me. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
I listened to another recording that you had done a couple of years back, and I realized that we have a few things in common. So we both had paper routes. We're both the oldest child in our family. Both went to UCSB and both not good at calculus. Has anything changed with your math proficiency over the years?
Well, it's interesting you say that, and maybe it's relevant to a podcast, is the subject. I actually picked my major at UCSB because they didn't require me to keep going in calculus. And ironically, I ended up starting my career as a CPA, so go figure, and became very comfortable in the financial world once I kind of learned to think differently around numbers and math and trust myself a little bit more. And candidly, it had went back to a sixth grade math teacher who essentially demonstrated to me that I didn't know how to do math, even though before that I'd been considered okay at math. And it kind of scared me off of it. And I wasn't as good at it after that. And it didn't happen until I began my career in accounting that I kind of began to trust myself again around it. And actually it was okay again. So it does tell you, don't let somebody else tell you what you're good at.
Can you share a little bit more about your childhood and kind of how that shaped who you are today?
Yeah, I grew up in Colorado. And my parents were from the East Coast. I'd say my dad in particular, but my mom as well, they were profoundly shaped by their parents' experience coming off of the Depression and World War II and kind of some of how the world interacted with them and they interacted with the world during that period. So I'd say my dad really had a bit of a scarcity mentality. He grew up, he watched his dad kind of scratching and clawing come out of the Depression and watched him, unfortunately, have a business go bankrupt on him. And candidly, it probably contributed to killing him, just kind of broken heart and disappointment. And not my dad, but my grandfather who passed away. And my dad kind of always had that, let me get to the finish line from a career perspective mentality with enough to retire intact and be able to support my family. And on the good side of that, he had me working jobs early on, mowing lawns and shoveling sidewalks and doing everything I could, delivering newspapers, as you said, and always working in the warehouse at his business and other things. And I think that was great for me from a shaping perspective on one hand. On the other hand, it said, limit risk, don't take risk. And that led into kind of how I started my career, which is in public accounting with a big accounting firm, and was CFO a few times and really only became entrepreneurial because the business I was in, which was the predecessor to Smile Brands, was failing. And the person who was the original CEO said, I'm going back to a different sector. And I kind of, at that point, for the first time in my career, said, you know what? I'm going to try this. And I had to set my mind to a way to handle that risk to go in because my childhood really shaped me to say, no, limit risk, limit risk, limit risk. And that's not conducive necessarily to jumping into something entrepreneurial, especially something new like dental at the time. It wasn't a big space.
Yeah, so I've heard you talk about mental models and mindset quite a bit. What does that mean to you? And how do you implement them in your life or your organization?
So I think there's a couple different levels to think about mental models. And the first is obviously you have to accept them. They're there. Yeah, they can be empowering, they can be limiting, but they're there. And you have to accept that they exist. Then I think for me, they exist on the personal level and on a group level also. And that's a little bit different. But on the personal level, like for example, jumping in to decide I'm going to be entrepreneurial and take this challenge on when I'd spent my career limiting that risk was the first big foray into that. And I was fortunate. I had went to a business school, and one of the professors was an industrial psychologist named Dr. Wayne Strom, who since passed away, but he's kind of one of the early guys thinking about how those affected organization. But the first thing I had to do is get my own head in order. And that was a mental model that I likened to being an ER doctor. And, because again, I'm trying to resist risk, not take risk. And so the way I got my mind there was I said, if I was the best ER doctor in the world and a patient was brought to me too late, I would still try like heck to save that patient. And if I didn't, it didn't make me a bad ER doc. That meant that patient was just mortally wounded or got to me too late. And so I looked at the business and I said, I like the business a lot. I think it's got a lot of potential. It's in bad shape, but I have to be willing to throw myself into it to fix it without reservation. And the freeing mental model was, well, if I'm an ER doc, I wouldn't say I'm only going to work half as hard on this patient because maybe the injuries are too grave. I'd try to work twice as hard. And I wouldn't consider myself a failure if it didn't work. I'd say, wow, I really went for it. So that really freed me up to really go for it in the business. And so that was kind of the first thing. And then the second was I knew in order to be successful in the dental business, and this is just a stroke of genius, right? You better be aligned with your dentists. Ooh, there's a big one, right? Yeah. When we weren't doing it, we just weren't aligned with our dentists. So I really jumped in and said, let me set this win-win mindset with our dentists and say, when you win, we win, but I also need you to seriously want us to win so we can support each other. And, I went around, we had 45 offices at the time, and I went around to every dentist in the company and said, look, this is what I need. Now that meant having 3 coffees, some mornings and 2 lunches and just going around and meeting with all of them multiple times and getting that alignment. But as soon as we had that alignment, I watched the business turn 180 degrees. And it was really interesting how we had 45 offices, we get the business to turn very quickly. Our investors go, wow, we were going to give up on this, and now we think it's the greatest thing in the world. Suddenly, we have an opportunity to buy a company 3 times our size. It's public. We buy them. A year later, we buy another company that's half again bigger than we were before that. And all of a sudden, we're a coast-to-coast national dental chain, first one. And it all came from these individual relationships, the setting of the mental model, and then the persistent execution of that, because you can have your mindset in one place. To get a group's mindset in one place takes a lot of repetition and a lot of listening and just a lot of reinforcement, if you will, of the behaviors, because they'll hear what you say, watch what you do. And so you can say you're win-win in your mental model, but then they're going to watch your behavior. And what happens when, it gets tested? Do you say, look, I'm going to lean in your direction here, but here's what I need to make this a win for both of us? And make no mistake, a win-lose relationship on either side is unsustainable. And so you really have to communicate around that. You can get more money out of me, but if you're not contributing something to my success, I'm going to have to replace you. And by the same token, if I'm making a fortune in your dental office and you're not getting your share, you're going to leave, and then I'm not going to be doing. These win-lose relationships can look good, but they're temporary. The win-wins are permanent and they grow. But again, they watch your behavior around it, not your words around it.
Right. How do you identify when you need to craft a new mental model? Like, it seems to me that through practice, you're able to kind of build these frameworks that help you through challenging times, but to actually identify the moment where it's like, wait, I need something new today, or I need to build this because this is not working. To recognize that part, I think would be challenging. Maybe for you, it's not because you've been doing it for so long, but what are some of the indicators?
It's a great question, Mike. And what I'd say for people, one of my favorite sayings, and it's a little bit of a amalgamation, but he who the Lord truly wishes to destroy is first dealt 7 times 7 years of success. So the more success you have with a mental model, the harder it is to change it. So if you think about the things that are going right or wrong in your business, if you reached out to grab a pot of boiling water on a stove and it was a metal handle and it was hot, you would grab it, your hand would pull back, burn, you'd probably say, ouch. And then you would do it when next.
You'd avoid it.
You learned your lesson. It didn't give you good feedback the first time you did it. The mistakes that you repeat are because they were working for you at one point and then they stop working. And that's harder because you got success. So your feedback is saying, oh, this is good. And then it stops working and you go, you don't even notice the first time or the second time. And sooner or later, it's beginning to destroy you, but you're not realizing. I mean, think about, put in dietary terms, the first time you eat a chocolate chip cookie, you say delicious. And so you eat another one and then another one and another one. At some point you have, tooth decay and excess weight gain and so on. But it's not because you got negative feedback the first time. And so how do you recognize that? To your question? Ideally, you have humility. So you see sooner that it's not working. Ideally, you have truth tellers around you who you encourage to be honest with you, and you see that. Ideally, you have scoreboards that show you objectively, like, whoops, those aren't doing what I think they're doing. And you have that ability to look at it. I guess this goes back to the humility and say, it may be that it's not working anymore, or it may need an adjustment. And I've seen it, and it's hard because we have a model, work, and then suddenly you go, ooh, it's different now. Why is it different now? And then you have to really dig in, like, well, our costs have went up dramatically in the last 3 years, right? We've seen wild inflation. So that changes the model. We've seen way more competition. That changes the model. And suddenly you have to go, I have to make adjustments here to be successful. And it's not all at once that you have the problem. It's a little bit every day. And then suddenly all at once you recognize it. So again, with the scoreboards, the truth tellers, but most importantly, the humility, just when you look in the mirror, it's like, this might be me. Let's figure this out. Then then the question becomes, how do you set a new mental model? That gets hard. Also, you have to socialize it. You experiment with it. You get that feedback to say, okay, something's off. What is it? And how do we get to the right place? And so, we've been living through that journey the last few years, and it's humbling, but it's also energizing, right? Because at some point, if it was all sunshine and roses, you get bored. I don't have to worry about that. It's not, right? So you go through this like reinvigoration process and experimentation process. And then when it starts to work again, it's very encouraging. And then you got to go hard at it. And again, a lot of repetition. It takes work to get people on board and to keep them there. And then, why is this working? Why is this not working? Is this not working because the idea is bad or the execution's bad? So it's experimentation process, I'd say.
If we go back to the kind of initial example of the emergency room surgeon, that model served a purpose at that time to help you become comfortable with the level of risk that you were taking on, and also allow you to see that there could be a path where the business doesn't succeed, but it does not mean that you are not a successful individual or capable of success. And then you move forward and the business expands, you become coast to coast. At some point, that model's likely probably not delivering the same impact for you. Was there like a moment where it was like, hey, now I need to start thinking, this is kind of the new me within this role, within this organization?
It's interesting to try to sort of dissect it, right? Because the most important thing on that day one time was that I wasn't afraid to jump in with both feet. So you think about it, I'm 32 years old. The people I'm supervising or managing are much older, much more experienced. Am I going to be timid or am I going to jump in and say, I'm ready to go? And so I really need to steel myself at that time, first and foremost, to say, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to trust my swing. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to be all in. I'm not going to be hesitant. I'm not going to protect myself by saying, well, I wasn't trying that hard. Right. I mean, I got to really give myself to it. So that ER doc mentality, if I got a patient to save, then I'm going to do everything in my power. That was really serving me well initially. So I was free to really lean in. Once I was in and I was leaning in, then it wasn't all about me. Because even then I had 1,000 employees. So now I got to say, okay, what's the next step? It's not all about me. It's not all about my effort. But I wasn't getting anywhere if my effort wasn't there. Then it quickly pivoted to another mental model, which is this pyramid, this relationship pyramid, which was about all the things we do day to day to make an office function. There's a Maslow type pyramid. All the things we do day to day to make an office function. Those are security needs. Those are baseline safety security needs. We do those because we want to elevate to a higher place. That self-actualization is the win-win relationship between that office leader and the company. And so that became the next mental model. It was about bringing people in to the tent, not just about me, follow me, right? Because that wasn't going to get it. But I had to have first that jump in with both feet, be free to go for it. Then I had to evolve it to include more people so they could find themselves in that vision. And then eventually that kept evolving. We had another one, our 3-word mission statement called Smiles for Everyone. And that was about like, look, we want to not just have a win-win relationship with the lead provider in the company. We want employees to feel that way. We want patients to feel that way. We want our broader communities in the world to feel that way. We want our investors, our vendors to feel that way, right? So it became, an evolution of how do you get the tent to be big enough that people can find themselves in it and also set their minds to what it is that we're trying to accomplish together, what works for them, what works for us. So you do have to look at what you're trying to accomplish and your counterparties, that are coming along with you on that journey and say, is there enough in this for you? Is this a win-win? And that's been enduring for us. But then you have to be humble inside of that to say, is it still working or do I have to do something else to achieve? So you may not change the mental model of seeking the win-win, but the ingredients to achieve the win-win might actually change. And again, the more success you've had over a longer period of time, the harder it is to go, oh boy, this isn't working anymore. That's my baby, right? Like, how's my baby not beautiful anymore? Okay, we got some work to do here, and it's hard. But if you're being honest with yourself, when those cracks are showing. And people around you might not see them. They might not even want to tell you. So that's a hard one too. Like the outside world might be like, oh, you're amazing. You're doing great. You're like, not so much yet. Yeah, we got some work. So that's, again, kind of a process you go through. If you can set your mind to embrace that as part of the joy of it all, is that challenge and the struggle. And, one of the mental models that I've tried to have, in the business is like, I'm not going to be 80 years old, sitting on a porch somewhere in a rocking chair, telling stories about how perfect it went at one day. I'm going to tell the stories about, oh no, the odds were against us and they were counting us out and we came back and fought our way through it. So if that's going to be what you love about your career, then can you get your mind to embrace that in the moment? And I've talked to people about that. And it's like, why have you hear anytime inspirational speaker or anyone else, and they talk about, their struggles and how great they were. And it's like, why am I so miserable when I'm struggling and they're so happy? And it's like, because they're telling you a story they already know the ending to. So yeah, they know the hero survived. So yeah, they love to tell you about the struggles when they know the hero survived. But when you're in the middle of it, you're not loving it, you're struggling. But there is something there where you say, I know I want the struggle. So I'm not saying you love it. You certainly don't want to self-impose it, but you can set a mental model to say, you know what? I know this is the part I'm in it for, and at least appreciate that there's nuance to it, that there is something good in there.
Yeah, it's a great way of thinking about it. Smiles for Everyone is brilliant in its simplicity and also, I think, in its application, because it can encompass so many elements of the business and what you're looking to accomplish and that win-win partnership approach and the alignment that you have within the organization. When you hear it, you're like, oh, that sounds almost obvious. But I know that it's very challenging to actually come up sometimes with these missions and visions, especially something that's so eloquent and so simple. What was the process like to come to the conclusion that this is going to be our mission and our vision is going to be looking to achieve that?
It was an evolution. So we have always talked about the virtuous circle, which essentially was the win-win relationship with everyone in our constituency. But I got in my head, I wanted a 3-word vision statement. And you got various words that were 3 words that were interesting, but they didn't flow. It all these challenges. And we did an exercise with the leadership team and came up with a bunch of stuff we didn't like, and then just let it sit for a while. And eventually, very candidly, it just sort of, after letting that all work subconsciously, it kind of came to me that that's actually, what are we actually trying to accomplish for everyone? Oh, wait a minute. We want them happy with us. We want to win-win. Wait, that's just dentistry. That's a smile. Wait a second, that actually works. So it took a while, and it's like, how did that not come to me the second, it's so obvious. But one of my favorite sayings is seek the simplicity on the other side of complexity. And that's the challenge is it's a very complex world. You're trying to accomplish so much. You're thinking about so many things. It is hard to get to simple. But I think every business can get to those three words that mean the most to them. The harder part is living into it. So you're sitting across from a software vendor, let's say, and you say, hey, I want this product on the cheap, and they say, well, hold on, we put a ton of money into it. We can't get it to you for nothing. Okay, well, what would make this work for you? And what would make this work for us? And where do we find this win-win where we actually do both feel like we're giving something up, right? But we feel like it's a mutually beneficial relation. And, hopefully you develop interpersonal relationships to do that, where you develop some level of trust for one another, certainly transparency, where you're sharing, this is our issue, this is what we need to accomplish, this is what we need to accomplish. And you just triangulate your way into a good answer working together. And that takes time. And it takes, like I said, that transparency, it takes an open mind. But that's what we fight for the most with Smiles for Everyone is how do we openly have that conversation so that we can deliver that win-win? Because again, that's sustainable. And if that's sustainable, then you have more of it. And if you have more of it, then you're building a business that grows and works. So it's getting to the words is one thing. But again, like I said earlier, people hear what you say, they watch what you do. So it's like, how are you behaving around it? And the last thing you want to be is that CEO where you say what the mission is and everyone around you just rolls their eyes and goes, oh yeah, that sounds great. That's not how he acts, but that sounds great. Yeah, you really want to be in a world where your people who are closest to you go, no, he actually behaves that way. Like that's how he feels. Not perfect by any stretch, but he does believe in the mission and he does act into it. And encourages us to do. Because again, you never heard a CEO with a mission statement. It's like, we're just going to rip everyone off and move on. They don't say it, but they behave that way. And even behind closed doors may talk to their team that way. And you're like, how do you think that's really going to go down?
Got to get some level of authenticity in there for it to really take shape.
Yeah, that's a great word, authenticity. It's powerful and people, how do you fake that?
Right. Absolutely.
That's not the point.
Well, it's interesting, earlier in my career, I worked for some companies that had mission statements and, you throw it up in a slide deck occasionally. And so you're not very consistent in the application. You all feel silly when you're talking about it because you're like, wait, is this real or not? Or is it authentic or not? How did you ultimately, you run such a large organization, get that to kind of permeate through the entire organization and really get buy-in and adoption and alignment within the team?
I think you have to accept the fact that people have different timelines they accept things. They have different mediums. They have different tests they go through. So I wear it on my wrist every day, the three words. It's important to me. So like the way I connect is, this thing's in my drawer. I take it out and I put it on. I roll it on a certain way that makes me go, okay, I'm going to connect to that today. So that works for me. I invite other people to do it. Some do, some don't, right? But it's interesting. Like I could sit there and say, hey, everyone in my organization is not wearing the wristbands. That pisses me off. And then you guys go talk to people and say, hey, doc, why don't you wear the wristband? Oh, well, I put it on, but when I put my gloves on, it comes off all the time. So it drives me nuts. Oh, okay, well, the wristband's not perfect. Okay, what if I put the three words on your name tag? Oh, I'd love that. Okay, so you have to be open to the fact that, different people, that's just the one example. But then, so then you can say, okay, well, that works for me because I'm at a desk all day. It doesn't work for you. What would work for you? And then do you repeat it? And do you get tired of repeating yourself, right? Because you can't. And we have new people in the organization all the time. If you said it yesterday, but you didn't say it today, they think, oh, it changed. You're like, no, it didn't say it changed. Why do I have to say it again? Because the world hits them with inputs that says Smiles for Everyone is not the way the world behaves. Okay, well, we're going to be that way. Then we have to repeat it over and over again. So maybe you start every meeting by saying the purpose of our company is to deliver smiles for everyone. The reason we're having this meeting is to further that vision. So why am I on this podcast? Well, hopefully to further the vision of Smiles for Everyone, right? Outside of Smile. So, okay, that's why. So, that's important. And then you have to just accept the fact that, again, people learn at different paces. They accept it differently over time. And I think the other thing you can do is sometimes do this mental model of being a cultural archaeologist. So if you're a cultural archaeologist, look at your company like an archaeologist would. So what artifacts can you touch, quote unquote, 100 or 1,000 years from now that say, this is who this company was? So if you see video of our company and everyone's wearing a wristband and taught, okay, they must mean something about that. If every time the CEO gets in front of a room, He says, our vision is to deliver smiles for everyone. Okay. If when the decision comes for in that meeting, and you say, how is this working for the various constituents that are impacted? Okay, the archaeology tells you take it seriously. Conversely, if the archaeology says, oh yeah, that's on the wall in the conference room, and once a year, I remember the CEO says it, and then the rest of the year, we just try to, rip everybody's faces off, then you go, the archaeology says your mission is virtue signaling, and in real life, that's not what you're about. So, I think those things, if you're objective with them, will tell you whether you're really serious. The archaeology can be, again, you can kind of extend it mentally, but, okay, I'm in the back of the room with people and the leader says smiles for everyone and everyone goes, oh yeah, right. And rolls their eyes. Okay, well, it tells you it's probably not. That archaeology tells you you're not living and breathing that mission. And what do you do when it's tougher actions? Do you say, look, I'm going to take this tougher action, but what's the most win-win way we can do this? And usually are people treated with dignity? Is there honesty? So, that's usually how I would look at it. And again, try to be as objective as I can. Now, I'm not very objective when it comes to smile brands, obviously. So, I have to gather data points that I try to look at objectively over time, and then I can get closer.
I love the story about the doctor and the wristband and the gloves, though, because it's a great example of there could have been an opportunity there just to complain about somebody not doing something that was important. And I think a lot of people do that. They'll say like, oh, this person's not doing this. They're not talking to the person. They're just complaining about the person or what their activities or actions are. And you're like, what? This is important. And I want to understand why. So you're curious, you actually care. Then you get an answer and it's like, oh, all right, this wasn't like an intentional snub of our company culture. This was a very practical explanation for why it didn't work at that moment in time. And you figure out another solution for it. It's just really speaks to a healthy approach to culture.
It reminds me of another example. When we came back, required smile brands, we always had a platform called G3, Greeting, Guiding, and Gratitude. And it goes way back in the company, but the first G was all about a great greeting. When someone walks into a dental office, they get this great greeting like, hey, I'm glad you're here. Welcome. And it was always important to me that the corporate office had that. So the receptionist would look up and say, welcome to Smile Brands. So I walk in the first day and the receptionist, who I didn't know at the time because she'd been new, was looking down, typing into the computer, and I walked right by. And I thought, I don't really like that. So I got all the way in my office. I'm like, no, that didn't work for me. I turned around, I walked all the way back. And I said, hey, introduced myself, met her. And I said, we have this thing, it's called G3. And it's super important to me. And you're the face of the corporate office, which, is really important. So when people come through, I just would really like you to give them a great greeting. She goes, okay. 2 days later, I'm walking in our conference room was right behind the reception desk. And I'm late for a meeting and I come walking in and I go right by and she's still typing away at the keyboard. Darn it. So I sit down in the meeting. There's probably 15 people in the meeting. And I'm sitting there and I go, it's driving me nuts. So I get up out of the meeting. I walk outside. I'm like, hey, remember me? This was kind of important to me. And let me explain to you why. And it goes back to experience. The next 5 years, she gave me the biggest greeting you ever imagined, made my day every time. We got into a ritual of doing high fives when I walked by. And I couldn't have anybody come into my office without saying, I love coming to your office. Between your assistant, who I've had the same assistant for 25 years, and your receptionist, this is like people, I feel like I'm going home. This is awesome. And it turns out that this receptionist was awesome, great person. Our accounts payable team had given her this other opportunity to participate as part of their team by inputting invoices. She ultimately, wanted to get another job there. And by the way, success or overachieving looked like being able to answer the phone and input all the invoices. And so it wasn't that she didn't want to give a great greeting. It's that wasn't set up as what success looked like. And so I told her, as the CEO of the company, honestly, the most important thing you can do is that greeting. It just means a ton to me and it sets the tone for the company. And she was amazing at it from then forward, but it took that kind of time to be like, no, I see your intentions are good. And most people actually do have good intentions. It's that they're off on a task of what success looks like that's different than what maybe you think it is. And other times we set them up for failure because they don't have the tools to be successful. So like, are we assuming that they're not doing what we want to do because we haven't even bothered telling them why? And now we're just mad at them? Or are we investing the time to say, hold on, this really does matter to me. And here's the why behind why it matters. Then they get it. And then they prioritize it. And like I said, she's amazing.
Has been ever since.
Yeah.
I love that story. What do you consider your number one responsibility as the leader of your organization?
Well, ultimately, it was to set the strategy or the vision as Smiles for Everyone, but it's to figure out what we have to do to broadly deliver that. So I might have said to broadly deliver that historically, we need to have our offices fully staffed, our offices well equipped, plenty of patient flow going through there, really good relationships with those providers and teams in the offices, and the rest will all take care of itself. And to your point earlier, like we were talking about, is that working? How do you know when it's not working? But if I say, I need to know all the elements we need to deliver Smiles for Everyone, I might say, you know what? It's evolving now. Now we need doctors trained to do clear aligner therapy, which means I need to really strategically dig in and figure out who's our clear aligner partner and what's the training. I need doctors, that are capable of doing implants in all these offices because that's the standard of care. And we got to raise up to that standard of care. And that takes other tools. We need our hygienists to have certain tools that they didn't have before because the technology curve is bending. We need AI in the offices. It's not just setting the strategy, but it's figuring out what ingredients we need for our people to be successful in delivering to that strategy. And I think dentistry for 20 years was a slow moving category. I mean, your x-ray machines lasted for 25 years. Your chairs lasted for 30 years, right? There wasn't a whole lot of change going on other than, the basics in dentistry. Now, in the last few years, the technology curve has bent like crazy. The product curve, the accessibility of different procedures to various providers has changed. The consumer's expectations of what they should get and deserve. It's just all of a sudden it's changed fast. So, then you have to say, I don't want to chase shiny objects. I want to chase things that actually impact our ability to deliver to that vision. So what is that? And first and foremost, that's probably how is your organization structured? How did you organize the structure so that people can have jobs that they can succeed in? And then who do you have in those jobs? But then there's this other aspect of what elements of that do we need to deliver to our teams to be successful to that vision, assuming that vision is the right one. Now I'm comfortable that vision is the right one, but the elements of delivering that vision changed. What people need to be successful just are different in this day and age. And it changed fast, right? So we went from clubs and sticks to fully automatic weaponry pretty quickly, when you think about that mentality of how fast dentistry's changed. And that's a challenge, because you want it to be like it used to be. And it's never going to be like that.
As far as setting vision, and I heard this, and if this is not accurate, just correct me, but I heard that you record a video that is able to be distributed through the organization, maybe at the beginning of each year, where you provide clarity on, like, here's areas that we're focusing on, here's our vision, this is what's important to us to gain alignment. Have I heard this correctly? Is that something that you've done? Have you done it for a while?
Yeah, and it actually ties perfectly back to the answer I just gave you, which is, I think historically, I'd say I'd record, one at the beginning of the year, a couple of those when I felt like we needed them during the year. Now I feel like we do them almost weekly.
Oh, got it.
Keeping people like shorter snippets, but I really want you to understand, here's what we're working on, here's what we're doing. Use this video capability to get groups from 10 to 500 or 600 together at the same time, depending on the medium, and say, listen, let's talk about what we're doing strategically and how we're evolving it. So I think the cycle times are much shorter than they used to be. And the need to communicate more frequently to different size groups. And there's times I swear it feels like I'm, on with 5 different groups in a day, varying sizes, saying, here's the why behind this strategy. And then dig into the what also, but the why behind it is really important. And I think it's more important than ever in this world, because you really do have to not just have the why, but reinforce it, make sure people are clear, and then see you behave into it, and that's takes more repetition. I'd say, 10 years ago, I could record a video at the beginning of the year and be like, there you go, there's the strategy for the year. but man, it's moving so much faster now.
So I have a parenting question for you. You were talking about shoveling snow, mowing grass, paper route. I was talking to a friend about how the paper route was like a microcosm of running a business. And it was just like the most fascinating experience of not only trying to sell to new houses so that you could expand your route, but trying to collect from people when they're like shutting the blinds and like locking the doors and turning the lights out, and then losing the money when you're sitting with your district manager and you fell short in your collections and it was just a really incredible experience to have as like a young child. And I'm looking for things to do with my children. I've got two boys, 14 and 11, that can not maybe replicate the same thing, because I think like the world changes and things change. But when you think about providing opportunities to teach your children the value of hard work and the importance of committing to something and sticking to it and not quitting and kind of all of that, what are some of the approaches that you've taken?
Well, it's interesting. The paper route, I've always I look back on that. I'm like, that really happened. Like we had inventory risk. We brought the papers at the beginning of the month, and if the neighbor closed the blinds, I ate it. It's like, you're sticking a 12-year-old kid with your newspaper bill. Like it's not the Denver Post that paid that. I paid that. You're literally sticking a 12-year-old because you don't want to pay from paper.
It's kind of a wild thing when you think about it, right?
It is a wild thing, right? And, so it's an interesting thing because you had that, I had that. Our parents didn't go, oh, I'm knocking on that neighbor's door and letting him have it, right? They left you to resolve it. So I think one of the issues is like, are we able to let our kids resolve some of their own issues? And, it's harder than it sounds, right? So will we let them resolve their own issues? I think that's part of the struggle of letting them work through it, because I don't think the medium is nearly as important as the mentality. So like my son, you make him work through, issues with football and various sports, and yes, got him delivering pizzas. And it's not fair that this guy gave me a $1 tip. Well, no, it's not fair. It's really unfair, right? It's not fair that I got bad directions and I had to find the place. Nope, it's not. It just is what it is, right? And so you're like, this is life. Life doesn't go this way. You're always going to have a reason to fail. This teacher doesn't like me. Yeah, maybe not. It would be unfortunate because that's really not how a teacher should behave, but it's possible. And you know what else can happen in your life? Y'all the boss, doesn't like you also. So like you let them struggle, I think. You don't let them fail in the point of being in danger, but it's different. Like my daughter rides horse every day up there, taking care of that horse. And by the way, there's some cold days and you got to bundle up and you got to deal with it. And, my wife does a great job with that and just taking her up there and, just deal with it every day because that's the responsibility you took on. If it's not what you want, then this is a long one to back out of. So we got to figure this out. And so I do think do we let them struggle, teach, offer our opinion, and if they're going to fail, because failure as a kid is an opportunity. And if you don't learn to fight through it, it'll just come bigger later. And so, if I had anything, I think as I'm thinking about it sort of real time, it's just like any of these things we did, it was really because we were on the hook and we had to work out our own problem within reason. And we probably didn't work them out on our own quite as much as we thought. I was thinking about it the other day on the newspaper route. When it was a really snowy Sunday in Denver, my dad actually either drove me in the car or pulled the cart for me up the hill. Like, okay, I was on my own. Well, not entirely on my own. I did have a little help here. But, the fact that I felt like I was on my own, I had to struggle through it. He wasn't going to go knock on the neighbor's door and collect the money for me. Okay, that taught me a lot. So the safety net's there, but it's not so obvious, I think.
My dad would drive me every Black Friday because the papers were so massive with all of the ads and everything in it. He'd be like, all right, I'll drive you on that. You can't even fit them all in your bags on your bike. Like, let's get up in the morning. We'll get turkey ready and drive you around the neighborhood and get these all delivered. So
yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, and you need that. You need that some level, but not so much that you even know it's there, I think. It's a real safety net. Not a bail me out and not a dad. They didn't pay me, for the paper. Okay, here, I'll pay you. No, not going to get it. Don't do that.
Right. Exactly. Nope. But I love that it's the mentality. It's not the medium. And I think that you can really apply the proper mentality across all sorts of different examples when you think about it that way.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it, if you have a kid who's, like he's a club baseball player and loves to play the sport, fine, then you can do that. But I want you in the cage every day. If you get a blister on your hand, keep hitting.
Yes, absolutely. I think a lot of people in this industry think of you as a mentor, either directly or indirectly. Do you have folks in your life that you consider mentors as well, or have you over time?
I have over the years, for sure, and still do to some degree, even some peers that I consider me mentors, at various times. So I certainly have had people that I've been able to meet with and lead on and, just share what the journey is. And, it's interesting, the mentors, the more open you are with a mentor, the more effective the mentor can be. If you guard yourself too much with a mentor, they can't help you much, right? So you have to be vulnerable there. And you want to pick wisely, but most people, I don't think it's a dangerous choice. You just can't have 20 of them. Otherwise, you're opinion shopping, right? But it is this ability to find people you're copacetic with, be vulnerable and open, and then, find someone who does share with you openly also. If I've been able to be successful mentoring people in the space, I think it's because I'm fairly willing to admit I don't have all the answers by any stretch, but have had some of the trial and error experiences that I'm willing and happy to share to kind of help people along in it. And there's no easy answers. So if you're struggling with something, it's not because it's easy. You would have solved that a long time ago. It's complicated. It's hard stuff. So I think that's important also, is accept the fact that business is tough. There's people chasing you. And if it was an easy issue, you would have solved it. Probably early in your career, you're probably like, I'm pretty good at this, right? Because I solve all these problems. You get easy problems. And then the further along you go, the more you're like, oh God, now I get the 5149s, and those are hard. It's thankless.
Going back to something you said about your dad earlier in the conversation, where kind of his goal was to reach a certain state of kind of financial security where you can retire and kind of take a step back and move out of the professional pursuit of a career or something else. And I've heard you talk about the journey a lot. And at some point, people reach a point where you actually could, from a financial perspective, step back, stop doing things. But the motivations change over time, and where you find your reward and the benefit changes over time. I'm just curious how you think about that when you're like, hey, this is an amazing journey that you've been on for many years now. Like, where do you find your satisfaction? Like, where do you find your joy? And where do you find your motivation?
Well, for me, it's always been about the building and the team and the camaraderie and the challenge. So if I'm not working, it's not uncommon. I'm talking to a buddy about their company, or we're going out to lunch and talking about something because it's interesting and it's motivating. It's my version of chess or whatever, right? I enjoy it. So a big part of it is that mentality you approach work with. Like, is this meaningful work? Meaning, if I'm successful at it, is the world a better place? If that's the case, that's really good news. Do I have the ability to affect people beyond myself in a significant way? And so, for me, like, I look at what we do day to day. If we treat 3 million people, okay, that's powerful. And if we have a standard of care that's the kind I want for my friend or family member, and we extend that to everyone, and I fight for that the way I would for a friend or family member. So, one of the mental models is, if your child was sitting in the dental chair and they said, I don't really want a crown on that tooth, just put in a big filling. You wouldn't go like, oh yeah, sure, Johnny, happy to do it. You go, no, a 3-surface filling has twice the catastrophic failure rate as an inlay on-layer crown. We're going to do the right thing. Well, if a patient goes, it's cheaper to do a big 3-surface filling, do that. You should say, hold on, you have a 2x chance of losing that tooth. I want to fight for doing the right thing for you. And yes, it costs a few bucks. So, you take an organization that raises the standard of care, rather than a 3-unit bridge, you do a single tooth implant. And you fight for doing what's right for people, then you're impacting the world in a better way. So that's good, that's challenging, and it's enjoyable. Then you say, well, if I were to retire, would I go out and sit on a couple charity boards and do that? Yeah, maybe. And that'd be good. I could help with advice, but I can actually use my value chain to get people on board with me to do something that could change the world in a much bigger way. So we have a Smiles for Everyone Foundation. We've done $100 million of dental care. I was able to call someone well in your organization, say, hey, you guys have business in the Philippines and I have an outpost in the Philippines. How would you like to, co-sponsor this with us? Like, I'd love to do it. So Eric jumped all over it. And now you guys are getting $25 of care delivered for every dollar you invest in a country where you have employees. And so, okay, I can use the platform to make a bigger difference than I would if I wasn't part of the platform. Okay, now that's a whole nother redoubling of the motivation to say, this is what I should be doing, right? Now, if I was only getting a paycheck or making more money, and at some point you say, okay, well, it's not going to change my life, and maybe I'll just do something different with the time. But if you have a platform where you can actually do something that's meaningful, and make no mistake, you have to find that meaning. And you find that meaning, and then you legitimately go, wow, by leaning into this, I can make a bigger difference than I think I could if I was not part of this thing. Well, then your will has shaped something to be an entity or an organization that's more meaningful, and it's a force multiplier for your ability to make change. And so, wow, okay, that's pretty cool, right? So, we've created this foundation. We spend $1, we can deliver $25 of care. That feels like something I should stay with, because if I donated $1 to a charity, it might put 70 cents of care out there. So, okay, this is cool. Let's reinvent this and then make sure other people can participate in it. We opened the tent. I'm happy to have anyone join, right? It's a 501c3. It's separate. It's not about me. It's not even about Smile Brands alone. It's just about making the world better. So invite people in. So you talk about motivation. The 3 million people we care for every year, we have to take great care of. They matter. The providers, the employees, they matter. Can we make life win-win for them? And then can we extend to this broader mission? You put that all together and you go, okay, it's a good use of time, right? This is not something I should be finding the finish line for. I should be embracing the ability to do what we're doing. And that mindset is what keeps me going.
Do you feel like because you have the ability to make such an impact, that it's almost like an obligation or responsibility as like a citizen of humankind to continue to do so?
It's interesting. I haven't really thought about it that way exactly. I think to some degree, because you have an obligation, maybe first and foremost to yourself. Like, don't waste it. That's a gift that you have this ability. And maybe it's a gift of all your hard work to put yourself in that position. Maybe it's a gift of good fortune to be in that position. Whatever it is, like, don't let that get away from you. Could be some real regret 10 years down the line, looking back going, oh my God, I could have made a difference. So take that obligation to yourself first. Like, you got to shape your own journey. And trust me, you may be meeting lower level needs. At some point, if you're successful in meeting those, you're going to look up and go, okay, what's my self-actualization? What's my highest purpose? And you're going to wish you had swung from that fence. So, take that seriously for yourself. You mentioned your kids earlier. What do you want them to see? You want to take care of them, which you do have an obligation to do and you have to do, and you'd be deeply regretful if you didn't take care. Then you want to help them see what is possible, reach higher. So, as a parent, you say, oh, I shouldn't be doing any of this. I should just be available. Well, maybe yes, but also they watch what you do and you want them to see that as they see you living into a purpose. So that's great parenting also. And bring them along on the journey. My kids have all been on missions with us, with the foundation, put the gloves on and taking care of people. Okay, that's cool. That helps them. So that's, I think there's an obligation to yourself. I think there's an obligation to your organization to make it more than. That's powerful when you do that. And then I do think there's some humility to say, listen, I should and I need to. The universe has put me in a position to do something. And if I don't, you can put that any test you want to that. I'll get to the pearly gates and be really disappointed, or I'll just be on, the end of the journey and be disappointed. But you don't want to blow the opportunity that's put in front of you. You will regret that.
That's great. Steve, I have really enjoyed the conversation. If people want to learn more about the foundation and participate, where can they go?
Smilesforeveryone.org is the foundation. And it's a big tent and we love to have people in on it. So we've had several, your company and a couple other in the dental space have contributed to joining and put their hands on Outposts to help. And we're adding new countries. We're going to Rwanda this year. So we're always actively looking for people to join us on that journey. We're interested in opening other ones too. So people have passion for a certain area and they want to help get it off the ground. It's game-changing stuff. It really is. And every Outpost we've opened, to be clear, we're training local people to take care of their people. And that's the most sustainable thing. And we really do make that work. And everyone we've opened is going strong. And we've had dictators try to shut down some of these and it hasn't worked because people find a way. It's pretty cool.
How many Outposts now?
There's 8
Very cool. 8 different countries. Rwanda will be the 9th.
8th.
That's awesome.
Moving fast. And we're looking for more.
Well, thank you so much for joining. Really appreciated the conversation, and sure I'll see you up on stage somewhere soon.
Yeah, we'll be together soon. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mike.
All right, take care. The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS, home of Dental OS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for listening.